Welcome back, deep divers. Today we're taking a plunge into the book of Titus.
All right, diving right in.
I've gotten a few requests, actually, to do a deep dive on the book of Titus. People really wanting to get a better understanding of it.
Absolutely. It's a book that can sometimes maybe get overlooked a little bit, but actually has so much to offer,
Yeah, especially today.
especially today. So
Yeah,
much relevance.
so much relevance. So for those maybe unfamiliar, just really quick, we're talking about a letter from the Apostle Paul to his, well, I guess you'd call him a coworker,
Yeah, coworker, protege, Titus.
Titus, who's on the island of Crete
Right.
and basically setting up the church.
Yeah, establishing the church, getting leadership in place, and really thinking about how to live as Christians in a very pagan, Roman, challenging kind of context.
Yeah. So to set the stage, Crete back then,
Hmm.
not exactly known for, let's say, upright morals.
No, no, definitely not a haven of peace and tranquility and good behavior.
Right.
Um, Paul actually quotes a Cretan prophet, Epimenides, who describes his own people as liars, evil beasts, and lazy gluttons.
Ooh, those are fighting words.
Yeah, it's not exactly a glowing endorsement of the Cretan character,
Yeah.
but it gives you a sense of the kind of environment, the context, right,
Sure.
that Titus is walking into.
Talk about a challenge.
Right.
So how does that then shape knowing that background, the way that we then read this letter from Paul to Titus?
It really does. I mean, you have to keep that context in mind. Like you said, it's a challenging environment. There's a lot of, let's say, opposition to the Christian message. And so Paul, in this letter, emphasizes a few key things that are really important.
Okay.
One of the big ones is sound doctrine.
Right, sound doctrine. Okay. Now, for somebody who maybe hasn't encountered that phrase before, what do we mean by sound doctrine and what's that all about?
Yeah, so when we're talking about sound doctrine, we're talking about the core teachings of the Christian faith. This is kind of the foundational stuff. It's about who God is, it's about who Jesus is, what he did, and how that then impacts how we live.
Right. Okay.
And it's really important in this context because you have all these different ideas, philosophies floating around.
Right.
And Paul's like, Titus, you need to make sure that the people you're leading are grounded in the truth.
Solid foundation.
Solid foundation.
Okay.
Because if you don't have that, you're going to get swept away by all these different ideas and winds of teaching.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so sound doctrine. What else is Paul really hammering home to Titus?
Well, one of the big things is leadership.
Okay.
Titus is tasked with appointing elders in these churches.
Right.
And Paul gives him a pretty specific list of qualifications. And, it's interesting because he talks about it's not just about their personal piety. It's not just about whether they're, a nice guy or a good person.
Right.
But there are very specific characteristics like they need to be hospitable. They need to be self-controlled. They need to be able to teach. They need to be just. And you can see why those qualities would be really important in this kind of setting up a brand new church in a tough environment kind of context.
Yeah, it's more than just, oh, you're a good person, so here you go.
Exactly, exactly. It's about, do you have the qualities? Do you have the character, the maturity, the ability to actually lead people?
Lead people well in difficult circumstances.
Lead people well in difficult circumstances, exactly.
So we've got the foundation, right? We've got the sound doctrine. We've got strong leadership.
Mm-hmm.
What about, the people in the pews, so to speak?
Mhm.
Like, what are they supposed to be doing with all this? What does Paul tell Titus to tell them to do?
Yeah, that's a really important point because Paul makes it very clear that it's not just about believing the right things, it's about living the right way. And this is where the idea of good works comes in. So Paul emphasizes over and over again that God's grace, which saves us, should also transform us.
Right.
It should impact how we live. And so he tells Titus to encourage the Cretan Christians to live lives that are marked by good works, to be honest, to be respectful, to be, good citizens even. And this is really interesting because it shows that for Paul, faith isn't just something that's private
Right.
or internal. It's something that should spill out into our actions and how we live in the world. And I think that's a really important message for us today, too.
Right, yeah. So often we can sort of separate the two, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, I've got my faith, I've got my beliefs, and then there's this over here.
Exactly.
But Paul's saying, no, no, no. That grace is supposed to change how you interact with everything.
Absolutely. It should permeate every aspect of our lives. And I think especially today, in a world where, there's so much division and polarization, this message of living out our faith in a way that's marked by love, respect, and good works is, I think, incredibly important.
Yeah. It's not about just sort of doing good deeds to be seen.
Right.
There's a deeper motivation here.
Yeah, there is. There is. I mean, one of the things that Paul keeps coming back to in this letter is the idea of living in light of Christ's return. That's our hope.
Right. Yeah.
And so knowing that, that shapes how we live. It motivates our good works. It gives us a purpose that goes beyond just, what's happening here and now.
Yeah, it's a bigger picture view.
It's a much bigger picture view.
So just to kind of summarize, we've got Titus, right?
Yeah.
He lands on Crete. He's got this letter from Paul. Paul saying, okay, first things first, sound doctrine.
Right.
Make sure that the church is founded on solid teaching.
Solid foundation.
Get good leadership in place.
Yeah.
Strong leadership that's going to guide people well.
Absolutely.
And then a big part of this is that grace that we receive should then impact how we live in the world.
Yes, it should transform us from the inside out.
And all of this, right,
Mm-hmm.
is done in light of this ultimate reality that Christ is going to return.
Yes, that's the hope that shapes everything we do.
Now, I've got a question for you, and for everybody listening, thinking about this.
Mhm.
What if you were Titus,
Ooh.
right? You get dropped off on Crete,
Tough assignment.
tough assignment, right?
Yeah.
Paul gives you this letter.
Mm-hmm.
How do you then approach this? How do you apply this in that really difficult, challenging environment?
That's a great question. It really makes you think about, okay, what are the key takeaways?
The key takeaways.
What are the principles that would guide me in that situation?
That's something for all of us to chew on, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
As we're doing our own deep dives into Scripture.
That's right.
Well, hey, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into Titus.
My pleasure. It's always great to dive deep with you.
Always great to dive deep with you. And we'll see you next time for another deep dive.
Looking forward to it.
See you then.